Inflation protection for retirement income. All right, so I'm reading this replacement ratio defined. This is from 2008 from the Aon study that they partnered with Georgia State, and they give some of the history behind replacement income for retirement. But I just let you in. Hold on a second. So, what's your retirement replacement rate? How much money do you need when you retire relative to what you had before? And the whole thing is somewhat silly in my opinion, but because the money you need is what your expenses are. That's all there is to it. It has nothing to do with your previous income. It has to do with what your expenses are. Looks like I'm like a Japanese karate movie. Anyway, so it goes back and they give some history about some of the documents they look at. And so the one that was first one was this right here. Report of the President's Commission on Pension Policy Executive Summary. And you see where it says, submitted to President Reagan. Submitted to President Reagan. Okay, now he's coming in. I thought it was pretty interesting. So what we're going to show you is this right here. Inflation protection for retirement income. Check this out. Coming up. The commission recommends that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, develop a separate cost of living index for the retired. A separate cost of living index for the retired. And now we've come up with that called the CPI which I talk about in my book right here. I'll share with you some info on that. This is from my book, Relax and Retire, and this is on page 102. In 1987, recognizing there may be a difference in the consumption patterns of elderly Americans, BLS created an instrument an inflation measurement specifically to the elderly called the CPIE, the Consumer Price Index for the elderly. All right, interestingly enough, in the first 25 years of its use, CPIE inflation was indeed higher than the other two CPIs, which is CPIU and CPIW. CPIAE came in at 3.3% annualized, where CPIU came in at 3.1% and CPIW came in at 3%. Interesting. So not a huge amount of difference. What accounted for the difference, though, was that it was weighted higher for a housing cost, significantly higher for a housing cost than CPIE, CPIE, housing cost for CPIE was 47% weighting of the total inflation amount. Whereas for CPIW it's 40% and for CPIU is 42%. That's why the inflation numbers are silly in that regard. But anyway, because once your house is paid off, you might be spending 42% of your income of your expenditures on housing, but that means because you don't have that much other expenditures, which is a good place to be. But I highly suspect that's not the case. Anyway, so right here, the commission recommends the BLS come up with a separate cost of living index for the retired, which we're talking about right here. And it's still not implemented with Social Security, and you don't want to implement it into Social Security. I'm going to show you why. The greatest emphasis should be placed on expanding pension coverage rather than providing full inflation protection. They wanted more people to have essentially a secondary source of guaranteed income as opposed to 100% inflation protection. Therefore, automatic inflation adjustments for employee pensions should be encouraged through tax policy but should not be required. And they aren't required. Retirement benefits from federal pension plans should be adjusted for inflation once rather than twice a year. Okay. And until a new index is developed for the retired, federal pensions should be adjusted on the basis of the Federal Average Wage Index or the CPI, whichever is lower. And this is what I've been talking about with Social Security. All these people are like, oh, this doesn't keep up with inflation. You crazy people. Hear what they're saying. Until a new index is developed for the retired, they're just talking about federal pensions, but this affects Social Security as well. Federal pensions should be adjusted on the basis of the average federal wage increase or the CPI, whichever is lower. You know what your Social Security base is based on up until 62? The average wage index, which has been significantly higher than that of CPI. So they're not doing it basing on CPI or AWI, which is lower. We're actually doing it on AWI up until 62 than we're doing on CPI. And CPI, the one we use, is a little bit less than CPIE, but not by much. Anyway, the point being is we've been talking about this since this is in 1979. It was issued to President Reagan in 1980. We've been talking about inflation protection for retirement income. But back then we had massive amounts of inflation compared to now. Oh, they're not measuring correctly. And I talk about this, I guess a sales pitch for my book. I talk about it. Look at your own inflation, dude. I call it the reality CPI. And what I calculated is, if you're, again, a contingent that your mortgage is paid off, but even if your mortgage isn't paid off, most likely you don't have an annually adjusted inflation rate on that. If you look at CPI right there, CPIE, that's for retirees. You see 100%. If you look at reality CPI, it's 55% of the inflation amount for CPIE. Why? Because look at housing right there. Housing cost, 10.07 in reality CPI versus 47% in CPIE. Are you actually spending 47% of your money on your housing costs as a retiree? Just say yes or no. 1 is a yes, 2 is a no. Put it in the show notes. As a retiree, are you actually spending nearly 50% of your expenditures on your housing cost on an annual basis? Not just this one time, by the way. We had to get some new garage door openers and stuff. We had a bunch of things around the house we had to spend this year. Sucks, but that means we don't have to do that next year, hopefully. Transportation. I don't know if you can see the transportation right there. They got 14.5% in the BLSs for your transportation costs. In reality, I say is half that. Why? Because transportation assumes that you buy and sell a new or used vehicle each and every year. You're just not doing that, man. Now, on top of that, they'll say healthcare. You see right there, healthcare, right there, 11.7. That seems right to me. Healthcare is about 12% of your expenditures. But anyway, the point being is, when you look at the reality CPI, it's not nearly anywhere near the CPIE, the CPIU, the CPIW. It's not. And on top of that, Social Security gives you the benefit of the AWI, average wage index, for cost of living adjustments before you hit 62, which is significantly higher than Social Security CPI. I think I might even talk about this in my book. Let me see. I talk about this book instead. Anyway, so this is my other book. Well, I have 5 books, but you can retire on Social Security. Anyway, it's very interesting that this stuff's been going on. And what was very interesting, too, is I checked this out. We had a link to Social Security right here. Alternate measures of replacement rates for Social Security benefits and retirement income. Look who's on there. My man Andrew Biggs had written this. Look at that, my man Andy Biggs. And I talk about this on my Twitter page. If you're not following me on Twitter, you're wrong. It's Scanlon Josh at Twitter. But I want to show you something here. Commonly accepted that the replacement rate of roughly 70% is adequate for retirement income from all sources, and Social Security benefits typically account for about 40% of that. However, the 70% replacement rate recommended by many financial advisors is generally measured relative to earnings immediately preceding retirement. But Social Security replacement rates are measured relative to wage index average of lifetime earnings. It is risky to draw conclusions based on replacement rates calculated using different denominators. They're going to talk about how they're going to help clarify that. Anyway, this is written from 2008 by my man Andrew Biggs when he was still with the Social Security Administration. Anyway, good stuff. I just thought I'd share that with you. I love the historical stuff of this because everyone's like, oh, the first time we've been here. No, it's not the first time. We've been dealing with this for freaking literally decades now. I mean, I was 9 years old when I was 10 years old when this, 9 years old when this was issued to President Reagan in 1980. 10 years old. Yeah, God bless. Love your thoughts. Don't forget to paw the like button. If you haven't subscribed, freaking subscribe. Just hit that little red button. It takes 2 seconds. Let's get me up, dude. Help me, help me, help you, help me. Ultimately, it matters what you do to help me. Don't forget to subscribe to my Twitter channel, and we'll see you later. God bless. Merry day after Christmas. I already ate, like, wife's out of town. I've already eaten like 4,000 calories of junk food. Don't tell anybody. Maybe I won't get fat and she won't notice.